Let me, at the outset, congratulate Dr. Christabel for organizing such a very important international conference. A very dynamic, imaginative scholar and academic. I came to know that the department is organizing a large number of functions, very serious academic functions. I was talking to Professor Anita about it, the incumbent head of the department, for her inspiring leadership. I also take this opportunity to congratulate all the faculty members and students here for having come forward to make this program a grand success. Ashwini has already introduced me. I've been a teacher here for quite some time. And so it is with the fond memories that I have come here. I have promised Dr. Christabel to speak on the underclass, the prospects, potentials, and perspectives. I have often felt that there is an urgent need for developing a perspective from the margin. So I thought this topic would be in order. Now, underclass may not be very familiar to many of us. It is a little hazy as well as fussy. This lecture that I have prepared is futuristic in orientation. Now, this class, underclass, which does not have a very definite shape, unlike the organized working class, which Marx thought would herald a new social order. The organized working class was considered as a class in itself, by itself, and for itself. As Marx conceived of it, it had a teleology of heralding a post-capitalist system. And it did in a few countries and continents. What happened to the post-capitalist countries, including what is happening in China, that is beside the point here. My thinking is that This underclass is not a class in itself, for itself, and by itself. Its political potential, or what one can call the revolutionary potential, is unpredictable. On that, one has to keep one's fingers crossed. At various stages, people used the term class to connote different things. Hegel used the term in the early 19th century when he talked about the bureaucracy as a class. Then Marx used this term for the working class. That was at the middle of the 19th century. Then French sociologists started using the term the precariat. Precariat broadly, forming those who are in the informal sector, so to say. There is an excellent book on precariat written in 2011 by Guy Standing. Its title is The Precariat. Subtitle is The New Dangerous Class. What can be the revolutionary potential or the political potential of the underclass cannot be predicted with any degree of definiteness. I use the term to mean the historically marginalized and excluded sections of society, and also the castaways from time to time. When the economy changes, many elements get excluded. Need not be the traditionally excluded, socially excluded, like the Dalits or Adivasis or women or the blacks. So this process of formation of the underclass has been going on for a long time. And it is based on resource status and livelihood positions that I am considering this group as a class, largely deprived and dispossessed, not in the sense in which Marx used the term class. Marx was using class in a juridical sense, with the idea in mind as the relation of the people to the means of production. Here it is deprivation and dispossession which account for the underclass position of the people whom we are considering. And this indeed is a universal class. In every country, we can see this class living very precariously. And what can be done for them is $1 million question. Whether there can be a revolutionary path for them. Suppose we consider the major global problems today, we can see more than 5 problems, like inequality of wealth and income, climate change, cyber insecurity, terrorism, and deprivation and economic insecurity of the underclass. What can be an approach to these problems? There is no unanimity on this. But scholars are unanimous in saying that the question of inequality of wealth and income cannot be solved within the existing democratic framework. Sometimes a revolution may be required for solving the problem of inequality. I am not looking into the problem of inequality. Similarly, climate change, cybersecurity, terrorism, these can be solved possibly through proper protocols, global protocols. Though the progress made so far in this direction is not very satisfactory. But I think this question of the underclass, the problems faced by an underclass, can be addressed in the context of the growing democratic and human rights consciousness. I'll be presenting something by way of a temporary solution. That is for economic security, not the question of inequality of income and wealth. Now, our approach in this, we have been working for a few days on this. The approach is normative possession, normative reasoning, not positivist. Normative reasoning is not a negation of scientific reasoning. It can be scientific. See, in a small book written by Eric Fromm in 1981, The Greatness and Limitations of Sigmund Freud, Eric Fromm says, too much scientism kills creativity. And Thomas Piketty, in his book, that voluminous book, Capital in the 21st Century, speaks about the need for a normative approach to the problems of the deprived and the dispossessed. That book was written in 2014. It has been widely used, not only in Ivy League universities and other think tanks, but also by all conscientious scholars and activists throughout the world. Then we have Amartya Sen's book, The Idea of Justice, written in 2009, in which Sen speaks about framework of normative reasoning. This book is wonderful. The idea of justice. Framework of normative reasoning. And according to Sen, there are certain threshold conditions for addressing the problems of the underclass. He doesn't use this term underclass, but the deprived. These threefold are conditions, threshold conditions, are presented in the form of a new trilogy: freedom, rights, and opportunity. Freedom has been said to be the major force for socio-economic change. Adam Smith mentioned this in The Wealth of Nations, while he was speaking about liberalism and individualism. And also, before writing Wealth of Nations, he wrote Theory of Moral Sentiments, in which he advances two terms: reflection and speculation. Any growing person or system needs to reflect and speculate. Hegel considered freedom in a more concrete manner. In the book he wrote in 1820, The Philosophy of Right, he defined property is freedom. Hegel's formulations are very relevant today. The two books he wrote about right, philosophy of right, and also the other book, Phenomenology of Mind. He considered freedom is property. Property is freedom. Property is subject and freedom is predicate. Similarly, in Phenomenology of Mind, he emphasizes the centrality of ideas, human thoughts. Ideas are subject. Reality is predicate. I think both these books we social scientists should compulsorily read. Then we come to Marx. This is very important because Marx is a misunderstood scholar in this sense. Marx said the essence of existence is human freedom. He very explicitly said this. Practicing Marxists do not take sufficient account of this statement. A sense of existence is human freedom. I hope some of you might have read Eric Fromm's the other latest book. What is that? Marx concept of man, where Marx talked about two functions of human beings. One function is animal function, which all animals, all beings have, that is eating, mating, and procreating. And human beings exclusively have this function of intellectual activities and freedom. Then we have John Rawls defining freedom. John Rawls, in his famous book, A Theory of Justice, written in 1931. Then we have Sen, of course, 2009 book, The Idea of Justice. Sen, of course, has perhaps the most realistic approach to development, capability approach to development. Capability is subject, others are predicate. Now, here the question of course, question of power comes in. Where do you place power? The central question that Foucault addressed. We have formal power and real power, then macro power and micro power. Foucault talks about the micro capillary modes of power. Now, this is important in addressing three questions: politics, power, and wealth. And recognizing these kind of thoughts. I am making this presentation mainly on perspectives based on certain foundational concepts, parametric concepts, foundational concepts and principles. That is why I defined some of these terms from the point of view of leading theoreticians to set the tone and tenor for the discussion. I have often felt that there is a need for developing a new political economy. One can talk about a subaltern political economy. And this can be broadly congruent with a political economy for the underclass. Now, in all these, we today talk about the social exclusion, marginalization. But what is this exclusion? Today, caste cannot be the important factor in excluding social groups. Gender cannot be. This exclusion today takes the form of digital exclusion. We have digital haves and digital have-nots. And who are these digital haves and digital have-nots? They are the resource haves and resource have-nots. Need not necessarily be rich and poor, but the poor and the non-poor, that kind of a division. Now, I brought in the question of power. This question is important because power kills creativity. Power kills creativity. Freedom promotes creativity. What is required today as far as the underclass is concerned is full flowering of human creativity. We will be coming to this point in a more elaborate manner in a few minutes' time. Here the instrumental role of property comes in. Property redeems, property entitles, it enriches, and it empowers. So the redemptive power of property right. Abhijit Sen and Esther Duflo, they have given the pride of place to property right. In the major books, Poor Economies, Rethinking Poverty and the Ways to End It, written in 2011, and Good Economics for Hard Times, written in 2019. There is a very revealing statement in Poor Economics. The Abhijit Sen, Abhijit Banerjee, he talks about women in Peru. That property right for women revolutionized women's position, role in society. Seeing her name on the title, the Peruvian woman became a revolutionary kind of person. Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, they make 2-3 revealing, instructive points. One is, success feeds on itself. Success leads to further success. Gunnar Myrdal had put it differently. He had talked about cumulative causation, where he said, allocation of capital will draw further capital into itself. Now, this kind of people, using various other studies, see the insights of Muhammad Yunus, for example, the person who established Grameen Bank, then C.K. Prahalad, his 2004 book, The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. These give a lot of fresh insight, not things repeated ad nauseam in development economics. According to these perspectives, we should be trying to understand the potential prospects and perspectives. Usually there is a conventional thinking that people on the margin or those who are excluded can have only perceptions, not perspectives. Because for developing perspectives, you need theory, a knowledge of theory, techniques, practice, and so on. So there is the necessity to reposition the marginalized, the underclass. The greatest challenge today is, according to this line of thinking, and which I find quite persuasive, is to release the creative potential of the underclass. Profound, vast creative potential. It is there the centrality of freedom as emphasized by Marx, Hegel, and coming. And that's John Rawls' idea. How does John Rawls look at development? He says development should be evaluated on the basis of what happens to the unprivileged, not to the privileged. Because there can be development, there can be growth and development, but the benefits of this can be cornered by a small minority. Today there is a lot of discussion on the top 1% of the world population, which is controlling global wealth and income. So what happens to the most underprivileged or totally neglected? Therefore, the challenge is to see, you can say that only a revolution can solve this problem of concentration of wealth and income. Yes, agreed. But it is a very distant perspective. When will a revolution come? And will revolution solve the problem? Did various voices disappear in post-revolutionary societies? These are very broad but pertinent questions. So, before revolution, shouldn't people live? There is the necessity to unleash the not revolutionary potential, but the creative potential of the marginalized and excluded, or what we call the poor. So now there is a need to redefine and reposition the poor. Usually economists speak about the poor as a single, sometimes homogeneous group of people. But there is a necessity to approach the poor in a nuanced manner. You can see broadly, I'm just as a rule of thumb, I'm advancing these categories. First, the resigned poor. They are resigned to their situation without hope, or expectation of coming out of the situation they are entrapped in. Then we have the disturbed poor. Thirdly, we have the aspirational poor. And fourth, we have the entrepreneurial poor. More attention needs to be focused on the aspirational and entrepreneurial poor. Who are the poor, in fact? The poor produce wealth for the rich. And in the wake of doing that, they produce and reproduce their own poverty and deprivation. This is a paradox. It is on this ground that Marx critique of Hegel's concept of property. Marx wrote this critique in 1843. Marx says poverty and wealth are produced by the same process. Though his formulation is not completely correct, completely acceptable. Because property right, Marx considered as a dialectical relation. That is, if one person can become propertied, it invariably means the deprivation of another. That formulation is not acceptable, at least in the present context. So here the position is to consider the poor as a proactive rather than as a reactive group. Teaching has got a lot to do here. Teaching the poor who they are, not teaching them about poverty line, relative poverty or absolute poverty, not doing survey on poor, because we have spent a lot of time on defining poverty, measuring poverty. Who are actually the poor? Poor are producers, consumers. Today, consumption along with labor productivity is the driving force of global growth. It is not the number of workers which determines profit, but the consumer class. Consumer class has become very important today. The politicians are perpetuating poverty, perpetuating the poor, because then they can speak for the poor. Swami Vivekananda said in his complete works, he is a Mahatma who bleeds for the poor. But now today, the problem is we have too many Mahatmas. The politicians, they speak only for the poor at the time of election. The poor are the people whom the politicians discover, so to say, at the time of election. Perpetuating poverty is in the interest of party politics. We can see a paradox here. Resolving poverty is in the interest of business people, industrialists and business. Today, entrepreneurs are not only producing those goods and services to meet pre-existing demand. In the wake of production, they are creating demand also. So you can see various business firms using brand ambassadors. Amitabh Bachchan appearing on TV screens, or Vidya Balan, Kareena Kapoor, introducing products. So not only goods and services are produced, but demand is also created by them. And businessmen want more and more purchasing power put into the hands of the people. Perpetual poverty is not in their interest. They need effective demand. And this demand can be generated only by putting more and more purchasing power in the hands of the consumers. And today we have a consumer-driven and technology-pushed economic order, whether we like or not. Presently, I am reading Amartya Sen's book, How Home in the World. Wonderful it is. There is a section on Mars. What of Mars? I think our politicians should read that book very carefully. Mars was not a development economist, development scholar, philosopher. But he had two ideas, axioms, so to say, axioms in elaborating development. Ability-driven production and need-based consumption. That everybody should contribute according to their ability. And you know, ability has been increasing over time. It is increasing ability that contributes to expansion of the productive capacity, forces of production. Knowledge production is always on the increase. That's why Marx said, human society can only progress, it cannot regress. Similarly, an individual cannot go back intellectually. He or she can move only forward. The need-based income distribution. So ability-based production and need-based distribution. Needs principle. Amartya Sen makes a fine distinction between these two. Everybody taking according to their need. So ability to produce always increases, forces of production always increase. Consequently, human civilization progresses and more production taking place. Because the producers have a responsibility, not only to meet their demands, but the demands of the others. There are others who are not able to produce, children, very old people, disabled people. We have to provide for them also. This Mahatma Gandhi later included in his formulation. Gandhiji's use of charkha. This I have become attracted by this concept, charkha. It is not that using charkha can herald economic progress, tremendous economic progress. No. But the philosophy of using charkha, it's my own interpretation that can be questioned. Because many people didn't agree with this. Rabindranath Tagore didn't. Amartya Sen is also not in agreement with that because they considered charkha as an old piece of machine. But the use of charkha, everybody producing something. As I told you, it is my own thinking about it. In a society, all are consumers, but all are not producers. Some people live off the product of others. Mark Bloch very clearly brought about this. Marxists, they make a mistake in thinking that it is in a capitalist society that dispossession takes place. And no. In the previous modes of production also, alienation had taken place. Various forms of alienation. Alienation from the means of production, from the product, from labor, and cumulatively from society. So this is a propaganda by some Marxists. I won't say all Marxists, but some Marxists. They put blame entirely on the capitalist class, on the capitalist system, as if in the pre-capitalist social formations, there was no dispossession, no deprivation, no exploitation. This is wrong. In all post-primitive social formations, Marx started with the primitive mode of production. In primitive mode of production, relations were horizontal, not hierarchical. In all the post-primitive modes of production, actual producers were alienated from the means of production, instruments of production. What is the potential or I would say purported message that Gandhiji was trying to send? All are consumers, but all are not producers. Gandhiji took a moral position on this. I think morality has very high importance in our existence. Justice we consider only as a moral point of view. That is a different thing. I had somewhere recently given some lecture on justice. Who deserves justice and who doesn't deserve justice. That is not the point. But justification. Gandhiji says in his autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. That's the most honest autobiography in the world. Gandhiji never says that he has found the truth. My experiments with the truth, he didn't find the truth. This is a very good message. That kind of an approach I saw in J. Krishnamurthy's books. I was a fan of Krishnamurthy once. I read almost all his books. And there are many books which his disciples wrote on him. After reading all these books, I was at a loss what this great scholar, great teacher was trying to say. I didn't find anything in Krishnamurthy's book as a message. But afterwards, I had a personal tragedy. Then I was at home. Rereading some of Krishnamurthy's books. Then I found a sentence in one of his books. Truth is a pathless land. It struck me. Truth is a pathless land. Nobody has found the truth for you. You have to find out. And sometimes it comes it doesn't come to you sometimes. Sometimes it comes very late. This realization came to me, what was under the central message of J. Krishnamurthy. Human mind has a peculiarity. Human mind is highly fertile. It's a wonderful process. But it is not creative always. It is creative at certain times. It has to be idle at certain other times. So Gandhiji's this purported message I liked, philosophy I liked. That every person should be not only a consumer but also a producer. Produce something. Through production, your personality changes, not through consumption. Since it is not the appropriate context, I am not going into that. What revolutionary change that production introduced in human history. So Marx and Gandhiji were coming to the same point of view that everybody should produce something. Production is such a noble thing. Now, the point is, I am not emphasizing the role of hard work. I am against hard work. That is not the issue here. The poor do a lot of hard work, heavy work, working for 12 hours, 13 hours like that. Yet, they find themselves in a life of deprivation and degradation. One should be doing creative work, productive work, not hard work. Hard work is not the secret of success. And two things are there. One thing, you should be getting the rewards of your work. That is a neoliberal or liberal idea, or what is underlying the idea of marginal productivity theory of distribution in economics. Every unit of a factor of production getting something equivalent to what it contributes to production. This functional distribution theory had a political role, political purpose, that if every unit is getting something equivalent to its marginal contribution, no factor of production is exploited by other factors of production. This was a diversion, indeed a travesty of reality. That is not the point here. Need-based is different. Needs change over time, across space. But then, if you have ability-based production and need-based distribution, the question of incentive comes in. Incentive for production. Artisan emphasizes this point. This incentive is very important. Actually, many post-capitalist societies in the post-revolutionary system, they introduced such a distribution regime. They made wonders, but they could not do two things. One, they could not provide incentives for production, incentivizing the producers. Therefore, too, the question of productivity was ignored. In the Soviet Union, production stagnated, productivity stagnated. Don't ask me about China. China is not a communist country. It is a capitalist country. Therefore, what is required, along with redefining and repositioning the poor, is the need for redefining development. In the post-growth period, one has to redefine development. Not only redefine poor, but development. The poor should get an agency role in development. They should not be just the receivers of welfare programs. At present, that is what is happening. For the underclass, development happens. Underclass needs education, thorough education. When you say development happens, it is an intransitive verb. That without your knowledge, it is something is happening for you. It has to be made transitive. Development is not happening, it is brought about. The development of the underclass is brought about with an agency role for the underclass itself. Active role. It is not that for them development is brought about. You can see some rulers saying like that. You can see most of the rulers. What do rulers want? Rulers are vested interests. They are status quoists. They want stability and continuity. Even rulers who claim to draw their inspiration and orientation from Marxism, they want stability and continuity because they are status quoists. Uncertainty is the enlivening, interesting aspect of life. What is the most certain thing in one's life? One would die. If one is born, one would die also. But nobody lives for death. Though we are sure about death, we don't know three things: when, where, and how we will die. These three are uncertain. So, as far as the underclass is concerned, instability and uncertainty are crucial. Only if there is an uncertainty, only if there is instability in the system, they can have a hope. Underclass needs this instability and uncertainty. Now here comes the question, therefore, of justice. Both John Rawls and Sen saying that ability-based or ability, efficiency, prompt inequality should be promoted. Sen looks at the question of justice in two respects. One, short-term, and two, long-term. In the short term, the aim should be to reduce inequality. In the long term, it should be to promote equality. So before the underclass also there are challenges. They are no longer socially excluded, socially marginalized. They are digitally marginalized today. They are digitally excluded. Digital marginalization and digital exclusion are the in things today. And these amount to the same thing. It is continuation of the historical experience of marginalization and exclusion. Now, I think I am coming to the concluding part of it. Not available. Now, I told you that this presentation is made in the mode of say in the mode of normative reasoning, in an advocacy mode. So what is required today is to recognize the redemptive and transformative role of property, and such a role is not recognized sufficiently because new problems are existing. Old solutions won't fit. Now there is a scenario recognized for the growth of democratic and human rights consciousness. Democratic rights are increasing. Therefore, we should look at the underclass as potential consumers, potential producers, and above all, as potential entrepreneurs. Now, this is a new phenomenon. You can see the aspirational mobility of people. Aspirational mobility used to be the central aspect of the middle class. Today, aspirational mobility is cutting across classes. Because today media is playing a very big role in creating new worldview, creating the picture